Got a little double dose of news here, Falcons fans, as Ian Cunningham continues to tell us exactly where his priorities lie when it comes to the Falcons draft. Welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. My name is Moose. I'm going to tell you what Ian Cunningham said about his process and his thoughts surrounding acquiring more draft picks. Now, before I do that, I think it's important to remind you guys exactly where we stand in the 2026 NFL Draft. I do not think for a second we are going to get back into the first round. But pay attention to these three picks right here. 3, 4, and 6. One of these two picks, in my opinion, right here, are going to be manipulated to end up getting more draft capital. Now, I don't think we're going to end up with 8 or 9 picks, but somewhere between that 6 through 8, probably somewhere right around 7 is probably the smart answer and the smart bet to where the Falcons will end up in terms of draft picks. There will be more coming, though. I firmly believe that. And it doesn't just come from my belief system. Ian Cunningham told you flat out he's trying to get more. So before we get into what he said specifically, I have a quick question for you. How many draft picks will Atlanta end up with this year? Like I told you, if my safe bet would be 7, but I could see anywhere between the 5 and 8. I'm going to stick with my answer of 7. You let me know down in the comment section down below. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just get into what Ian Cunningham said. For us, it's one of those things where we have to go into this thinking that we only have the 5 picks. Smart, very conservative. That's the worst case scenario. If we come out with just 5, then we come out with just 5. But we're already looking at different ways to potentially manufacture some more. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Okay, I want to just briefly touch on that for one quick second. Manufacturing more picks. Well, there's only 3 ways to get more draft pick, guys. That's it. You can either trade a future pick, trade a player, or trade a player and a pick. Now, I know that there's compensatory picks that you get when other players sign elsewhere, but it does not look like necessarily that we're going to get any more 2026 draft comp picks. It would be for 2027. So the only way that you can manufacture more picks would be to trade a future pick in 2027 or 2028, trade a player, or trade a player and a pick. Well, the first things first. Who are the teams that have an abundance of picks in this year's draft that would be willing to move off of them? That's the first thing you have to identify. Those are the teams that usually make the first calls. If you have an abundance of something, you're going to look to sell that something. It's just economics 101. And I've identified 5 teams that have a surplus of picks that they could move off of, either one or more than one, to end up, either getting a player or perhaps they just want pick swaps. Maybe it's you just trade a pick. There's many ways to do this, but those teams are as follows. The Steelers have 12 picks. Funny enough, that's a shit ton. The Patriots, who actually just made a trade, but they didn't give up a pick. They pick swapped. They have 11. The Dolphins have 11. The Vikings have 9. And the Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski's former team, also has 9. Now, the team that I have seen a lot recently linked to the Falcons as potential trade partners are the Pittsburgh Steelers because of how many picks that they have in this year's draft. They have the most, by the way, out of any team in this year's draft. And here's what SteelerNation.com writes about their team. It would come as a shock if the Steelers actually ended up using all 12 selections that they have at their disposal. It makes no sense to do so, which means that Omar Khan, has a few ways to cut down on that number come the NFL draft. Well, we only have 2 weeks until the draft starts, and I know that trades happen on draft night throughout those 3 days, but the next most important thing that you have to identify is not just the picks that you would have, but who are the tradable players for the Falcons? Who are the players that Atlanta could say, okay, if we wanted to move off of them, what could we get? Well, I think there's not a lot of top-tier talent that you'd be willing to part ways with, but there are some players that could round out that depth that we're not necessarily using right now that could end up getting us some day 3 picks. And I'll tell you who those players are coming up here in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, remember MTR T-shirts, chatsports.com/MTR. Meet the Robinsons. You can get your T-shirt right now just by going to chatsports.com/MTR or just clicking on the link that I put in the comments and description of today's video. We're going to have nonstop gear for you coming forth as the draft comes along, and make sure that you're always keeping an eye out for those deals. One more time, chatsports.com/MTR in the comments and description of today's video. All right, so we know that it's not going to be Kyle Pitts, or at least we don't think it's going to be Kyle Pitts at this point, because he did show up today, signing his franchise tag, showing for the voluntary workouts aggregated by Sleeper NFL, but first originally reported by Ian Rappaport. So we do believe that Kyle Pitts is here to stay at least for one more year. That much we know. But those tradable players that I was talking about, players that I believe what we can either move off of or maybe aren't serving their purpose for where they were drafted or on the team currently. Here are 5 players that I think have trade value, right? Because that's the one thing that you have to also identify. Do these players hold value for other teams? And I think these 5 do. Mike Hughes, Clark Phillips, Bralen, Trice, Troy Andersen, and Demarco Hellams. Now, Hughes, Clark Phillips, just because mostly there's an abundance at the cornerback position, and I also believe that we want to we do want to draft a corner, but we want to develop Kobe Bryant. We will probably draft a corner, so you could probably move off of one of those 2 corners. Bralen Trice still has not taken the field. There's still some thought that if he is healthy, there is talent there to be an edge rusher, but at this point, you could end up getting a pick for him. Troy Andersen, self-explanatory, another guy that really can't stay on the field. And then Demarco Hellams is an interesting name. And I put Hellams on this list because he's a young player that I believe a lot of different teams could end up trading for. And that could be a player that they have as not only a rotational safety, but if there is a team like the Steelers who need a younger safety, that's a player that they could add to round out that spot. And remember, the Falcons safety depth chart just added another one. We just added Sidney Brown. You've already got the 2 best safeties in the league. Jesse Bates, Xavier Watts. They're not going anywhere. At least I don't think Jesse Bates is going anywhere right now. So Bates and Watts, and then you got Brown at that spot. Demarco Hellams, who's a really good special teams player, but really has not seen the field nearly as much as you would like. Well, I talked to our Steelers host, and I said, what's your one big area on defense that you need? Because I don't know that the Falcons could give up anybody on offense other than like an offensive lineman. But he said, well, they need a safety, and they probably want a young safety. And I'm like, perfect. Demarco Hellams is a player that you could potentially identify. So the Steelers need a young safety. Hellams hits hard and is a good special teams player. That's another area that the Steelers are weak in. They need good special teams. And here's the career stats, guys. For everybody that's like, no, we cannot trade Demarco Hellams. He's only started 4 games. He's got a total of 50 tackles. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. That's a good thing. He's a very good and physical tackler. And he's got a pretty decent special teams grade, 65.8. But I'll remind you that when you have a surplus at a certain position, you can move off of players at that position. And Ian Cunningham already told you that he's taking calls. It's not just Kyle Pitts. He's taking calls on other players to get more draft capital. He also told you that draft capital to him is currency. So if you have something that's a surplus and you want to move off of it, if you identify trade value, then why not? I feel like sometimes people get way too attached to the players that they've drafted. Sometimes it's okay to just say, you have a need, we've got a player, we need a pick, here you go. And it's just business. It's nothing personal. All right, let's move on to some other news. I thought this was sort of noteworthy. David Sills is signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so good luck to him. He reunites with Zach Robinson down there in Tampa. Good luck. He's going to end up being their wide receiver 6, in my opinion. And look, last year, I know he had a good moment for the Falcons against the Buccaneers, but I'll also say this. We are in a much better spot with our wide receiver room than we were last year. I think it goes without saying. You got a healthy Drake London back. Darnell Mooney is out of the building, even though he was good for a while. The injuries piled up. He had a bad year last year. Jahan Dotson should be a really good wide receiver, too. Zacchaeus comes back. And we all unanimously agree the Falcons will probably draft a wide receiver. So it can't get worse than it was last year. But for losing a wide receiver, we actually gain a better weapon. We gain another tight end, and that's Austin Hooper. And I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking about Hooper because there's a lot of people in New England that believe that he's already regretting his decision to sign with the Falcons in free agency, and I think that's a load of bullshit. But let's just start with why I think Hooper is a good addition here. Last year, Kyle Pitts was your really only tight end option, and Kyle doesn't play like a traditional tight end. He plays like a wide receiver. So really, your only other actual tight end option was Charlie Warner. And we all know that Charlie Warner's a good blocker, but he doesn't do much in the sense of the receiving game. Well, enter Austin Hooper, who might not be the best tight end out there, but he does both. So here is what Chowder and Champions, the New England Patriots blog, said about Hooper potentially regretting his decision to sign in Atlanta. New England didn't miss a beat either, bringing in Julian Hill to take Hooper's place. This, along with Atlanta's quiet offseason. First of all, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. We signed like 17 players. That's not a quiet offseason, morons. Should be more than enough to push Hooper over the edge into realizing what a mistake it was to go from one of the league's most respected franchises to the laughingstock that is the Falcons. Are we actually listening to a blog that, first of all, has no idea what they're talking about? They got everything wrong in that. And two, they've got Chowder in their name. Chowder is the first name of their blog. That should tell you all you need to know. These guys are chuds. They have no idea what they're talking about. But let's just go back and talk about Hooper's last 4 years. Like I told you, Hooper is not an elite tight end, but you're not signing him to be one. You're signing him to be a good tight end too. And Kyle Pitts, we already know, does not play like a traditional tight end. So what you're getting is the wide receiver style mold of Kyle Pitts and the actual tight end play of a guy like Austin Hooper. That's good. That's really good. And I'll be the first one to say it. David Njoku is still out on the market, still unsigned. There's been no indication that he's intending to sign with the Falcons. But you could always draft a tight end. Like, there are plenty of ways that the Falcons could address the tight end spot to where Kevin Stefanski has already told you he prioritizes it. It's a premium position to him. But Hooper is an automatic upgrade to the tight end group because of what the Falcons lacked last year. They lacked someone that did it both in the blocking and in the receiving. Warner did it in the blocking. Pitts did it in the receiving. Now you got a player that does both. That's the good news. All right. Last bit of news. It's actually more so like a sidebar because I didn't want to. It's not necessarily a triple dose. It's more of a double dose plus one, if that makes sense. James Pearce Jr. is not expected to be in attendance for the voluntary offseason program. This, to me, was not necessarily newsworthy because we didn't really expect it to happen. I expected that he was not going to be there, and that's because of the ongoing legal situation, obviously. But he's also got some upcoming court dates that are very important. So my assumption is that he's taking all of the time that he needs to with his lawyers and his legal team to address what's going to happen here in the next coming days. Like I told you, it's expected. So, yeah, it's really, it's nothing that's crazy, but the three main points surrounding James Pearce Jr. right now that you need to know are these three. Pearce has a hearing scheduled for April 21st. He's got a docket sounding scheduled for April 23rd, and he's been charged now with 3 felonies. Remember, one of those felonies ended up getting dropped. But why is the 23rd and the 21st so important? Well, the NFL draft starts on the 23rd. So you have now got a very important 2 days, actually a 3-day period between the 21st and the 23rd, where a lot can be decided by not only the league, but the Falcons as well. on what they do with their picks in this upcoming draft. And speaking of, we'll be live for said draft. So make sure that you hit that thumbs up icon if you are ready and going to be joining us. And it also shows me that you made it to the very end of the video. All right, that's all I got for you, Falcons fans. Thank you guys so much. You're going to get double doses of content every single day from here on out. As always, rise up and be cool.